So Alan and I, at the very beginning of COVID, we decided that we were going to sort of spend 20 minutes every afternoon just speaking to people. This was when we were all in shock and we were all at home and we didn't know what was going on and we thought the plague was going to kill the whole world and everything else. So we figured that the only thing of service that we felt we could do was to sort of provide, with our expertise in NLP, that we could provide people a way of reframing things, right? To be able to look at their situation and their environment and just offer any kind of like suggestions or support or advice or, whatever we could come up with. And so we were doing things like just teaching people peripheral vision and, how to activate the parasympathetic system so that you could find some calm. In fact, I think that's what we called it, was like calm in COVID or something like that. And so for many months, we actually did it every single day. And then once COVID, we all realized we weren't all going to perish all at once globally. Catherine's cat, I love it. Then we backed off, but we really liked what we had created. We really felt like there was just a nice connection that we had with people where we got on and we were just kind of vamping. We were really taking advantage of, here's some people who are interested, and we have, lots of different topics or every topic. I mean, I don't think that there is a topic that NLP isn't applicable to, meaning that, working with internal representations and beliefs and all the things that make up our human condition, our human reality, isn't relevant. And so we decided it was too much to do it every day, obviously, but we decided to do it weekly. So we did it on Tuesdays, and that's how this came to be. So since then, we've carried on, and we've actually done something called Abundant Coach every Tuesday nights, or I guess last year we were doing 3 nights, 3 out of 4 every month. And so what we were doing was we were doing a really, really loose kind of, just whatever we felt would contribute to your abundance as a person, as a coach, in all areas and all aspects. But I've had the conversation with some of you. I think that the truth, of course, is that Alan and I have not chosen to specialize in business coaching. So there are a lot of really, really, really good coaches out there who do business coaching, very specifically, getting into a business mindset, how to organize your business. And they use NLP tools are fantastic for that. But that is not where I work, and it's not where Alan works. And so we decided that the word abundant coach was something that we wanted to get a little bit more specific to where our expertise is. This alternating, Alan does every other Tuesday, and it's going to be very specific to trauma. And those are the trauma talks. And then I'm going to speak to what I'm calling courageous coaching, which is really a much more, I use the word softer, and I think it's appropriate. And yet I know that there's a connotation that around the word softness that has an element of sort of, I don't know, that I'm not sure, whatever comes to mind. But that is how I describe it. And it's more transformative than directive. And so what I'm recognizing is that there's a courage involved. There's a courage involved in everything, but specifically in the type of coaching that I'm doing, I feel like more than anything else, that's what I'm kind of nurturing and harnessing in my clients, is to really tap into their own courage. And so everything has really taken this shape and this form of, especially with healing work, right? I mean, when you're doing healing, and whether it's emotional healing or mental healing or physical healing, there is a really, really, really deep element of trust that requires just like mountains of courage to be able to get into that space and then to stay there, right? So that's where I'm going to be focused. So thank you for showing up. And I figured it would make sense to start the first courageous coaching talk just specific to courage. So just looking at courage, defining courage. I said to you guys all in the communication that went out to bring a pen and a pencil. I wanted to actually workshop this a little bit, because I think that courage is so important to all of our coaching. And I know what most of you do. Let me just get the right view here. But there you are. There's everybody. I was only seeing a few of you. Hi, guys. Okay. Oh, it's got all warm. Okay. That's so funny. So yeah, I know what most of you do, and I'm really interested in feedback. So I am going to sort of deliver, in a certain way. I'm going to deliver what I've got that I think is really pertinent and really important in terms of courage in coaching. But I am going to ask you to do this practice, this sort of exercise on yourself. What I'm asking you to do, of course, is something that I would also recommend doing with your clients, because it's such a beautiful reflection on your own areas of courage and values, which are always aligned, right? You can't really talk about courage without talking about values. So just to begin with, I know, well, you guys know that I'm a fan of Brené Brown, and I feel like her work, the reason I go to her work so frequently is it's not because, a lot of people you're drawn to because of their charm and their, I don't know, like their vibe, right? And so while I do think she is absolutely charming and lovely, I also just really, really appreciate the fact that she has so much research, right? Like when she has a hypothesis. So when she says to herself, I'm suspect about vulnerability or shame, or she goes to the data. She actually goes and she gathers the information, and she has such an interesting perspective. And I love the fact that it's backed up. So when she says, vulnerability is a prerequisite for courage, she's not just hypothesizing. She's not just sort of bringing together the pieces in her own mind of what makes sense to her through her filters and based on her life and all that stuff. She's going to the data. She's going to like the 10,000 people that they asked about courage or about vulnerability or about shame. And she's gathering that data and recognizing this is how human beings, gross generalization, but this is how people tend to have this direct experience. And so it's really good. It's really good to go to her work, and that's why I refer back to it a lot. So, in terms of courage, what's so cool always, I'm a bit of a nerd here, but I always think it's really interesting to go to Lake Webster and find the dictionary definition, because I have a lot of respect for it. I really feel like, as much as we, I don't know, it's academic maybe, but it's still these. It's okay. I got you, Michelle. Yeah, cool. Totally cool. It does the meanings and the definitions of things in Webster, these standardized dictionaries, they hold over time. And I think we have to give that a lot of credence. Like that means a lot. The fact that this is the definition that over the last, however many hundreds of years that we've been defining things in such specific ways, this is the definition that holds. This is the one that is most accurate to the human experience of it. And I know, we can talk endlessly about biases and all that kind of stuff, and I'm sure it's full of it. But for the purposes of right now, so the Webster Dictionary definition of courage is the ability to do something that frightens one. This having strength in the face of pain or grief, which I thought was very interesting that they single out pain and grief as something that requires courage. In contrast, the definition of bravery in the dictionary is courageous behavior or character. And I think that's really interesting, because in NLP, we're always making distinction, right, between behavior, intention, belief, response, emotion. Like we separate those things out, right? That's how we become really effective NLP practitioners, is that when my client says to me, I did this, I don't see it as one big lump of a thing that they did. I recognize that there is they're giving me the behavior. Any assumption that I make about their motivation is an assumption. It's a mind read, right? Until they actually tell me their intention and what motivated them to do that, and what value drove that, and what belief they have that caused them to think that they should do this based on their, all of those pieces, then all I know is a behavior. And so I think it's really interesting to recognize that in the dictionary, the definition of bravery is actually the behavior of courage. So, yeah, go ahead. Who's someone? Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Oh, it's Ashley. Hi, Ashley. I can't even see you for some reason. Oh, because your video's off, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm in the car. Sorry, team.
No worries. Cool. So it says here in the dictionary, a brave person is a person who sees a dangerous situation and immediately reacts bravely without thinking. Courage, on the other hand, is seeing a situation or a dangerous or scary experience and acting even though you're scared. So I think it's really worth thinking about this. I mean, think about yourself, right? Personally. So when you have to call courage, when you actually you recognize that you're experiencing fear and you know that in order to do whatever you have to do, you actually have to call up your courage, which is quite a different experience than the things you feel brave about, right? Like the things that you feel brave about tend to be the things that you kind of do without thinking. And the reason we identify them as brave is normally because society says they're brave, right? So if you happen to be someone who likes to climb mountains or something, and you don't actually feel a lot of fear with it because you're so trusting of your skill or whatever the case may be, you do it. And it's an act of bravery. I mean, I would agree that it requires a pretty brave person to climb a mountain, but the person may not experience that. And yet they would identify the behavior as being brave because the world says so, right? So when we see somebody that runs into a fire, firemen are brave, or firefighters are brave, and police, and all of these sort of identified roles, and yet courage is so distinctly different. And so I found it useful to remember that bravery is never something that we need to really foster in our clients. Bravery is the stuff, it's the after effect, right? Bravery is what comes after something has been practiced to the point where there's no more fear. So each of us can probably identify, I would say that when I first started driving a car, when I was 16 years old and I got my driver's license and I wasn't very confident in my skill. And then my parents said, okay, you're ready, go out in the car for the first time, without anybody else. That required courage, right? That was a courageous, all of us who do something like that need to call to, and if I had trouble, it would have been helpful for them to get me a coach to help me feel more courageous about my own ability to drive the car. The fact that I have a client who drives a car and doesn't think about it anymore, right? Most of us here who drive cars don't have to necessarily call anything anymore, right? When I get in my car, I don't need to call courage or bravery. I get in my car, I just get in my car, right? It has turned over time into something. And yet I do, and most of you will, if you continue to do NLP coaching. I've worked with lots of people who have had to call to courage and feel like it was a brave behavior to get in the car and drive because they've had an accident or they've had something, they've had some sort of modeling or an experience in their life. And I think that distinction, recognizing that bravery is something that just comes after courage, and we don't need to ever really pay much attention to it other than to celebrate it, right? Other than to let somebody recognize they can trust themselves because, and blah, blah, blah. I wanted to point out too that the opposite of courage is very, I don't think we have an agreed upon polarity to courage. Some people may say it's fear. Right. So a lot of people will talk about it as though it's fear, but I think that is I don't think that works. I don't think, because fear is not the opposite of courage. Fear is required. It's essential to courage. You can't have courage without fear. And I would say that there's probably something more accurate like weakness. I don't know, you could come up with a number of different definitions, likely. The definition of weakness, which I've selected myself personally as being probably the most direct polarity. So when somebody is lacking in courage, more often than any other term or descriptive term, my clients tell me that they feel weak. Right? They feel like there's something weak about them if they don't have the courage to do something. And the definitions for weakness is lacking power to perform physically demanding tasks, so lacking physical strength and energy. The second definition is liable to break or give way under pressure, something that is easily damaged. And the third one is something lacking intensity or brightness. And I think that is so beautiful. Like, it's such a beautiful way to demonstrate to your clients why courage is something that they want to build in themselves, right? So whether it's specific to like courage for X event or X, activity, whatever it is, or just a general sense of believing yourself to be a courageous person. Like, how wonderful it is to be able to describe yourself, to lock into your identity that you are a courageous person. What would that do? I mean, I know that I have, most of my clients, if they could feel that, like have a full experience of just saying, yeah, I can identify as a courageous person, that would change a lot, right? That would change a lot about how they anticipate their own response and their own approach to things. So I think talking to a client about, like, it's not about getting the thing done, right? When you have courage, it's easy to get really focused on the outcome of, like, if you're courageous and you do this, you may get the promotion, right? If you have courage and you do this, then you may get, closer to your partner because you've just done something hard and been really honest. But I think it's probably important for you as a coach to really stay focused, if not yourself, but also with your client, on things like, when you have courage, it increases your brightness. When you have courage, it makes you less easily damaged. When you have courage, you're not going to give way as easily under pressure. When you have courage, you're going to have the energy required to do the things that cause you fear or cause you, that seem difficult. The other thing I think is really important to do before we get into this is a distinction between different types of courage. Physical courage is a whole thing, and a lot of you may work with people who feel very, very, I draw them, you guys all know this, I draw the AD people to me. I draw the people, so many of my clients are like thinkers like I am. We give all our authority to our cognitive ability, right? We hold sort of intelligence and analyzing and thinking and processing, above everything else. And so there are those people that may have a lot of courage when it comes to their ability to argue, to intellectualize, all that kind of stuff, but they really don't have a lot of courage when it comes to their physical experience of life. So these are the people that, like, it's not just not having the courage to, like, pick up heavy things. I don't normally do a lot of coaching around helping people pick up heavy things. But to have the physical courage to do things like dance, trust your body, to actually believe that, like, a breathing exercise can contribute to your own calmness, right? Like your own resilience. It's this willingness, this courage to actually give your physical being the value, I guess, that it deserves. And that is courageous. Like, I know from personal experience that, like, going into those experiences where I'm cut off from my mind, where I'm told by the guide that I'm working with, like, I don't want you to think about this. I don't want you to analyze this. I don't want you to make sense of this. I want you just to feel this, like, let your body feel this, and let your body be, is just, it does not feel worthwhile, right? For me, it doesn't feel worthwhile. And I actually have to draw up what I would call this courage to be able to do that. For other people, it is very much, I also physical courage in terms of endurance and resilience and believing in your body and trusting your body can get stronger and all that kind of stuff. Then, of course, there's emotional courage, right? And this is probably where we do a lot of our work. Most of our work, I would say, is in mindset, mental courage, emotional courage, the courage to, well, we'll talk about it in a minute, but all of those, millions of categories that go under emotional courage. And then there's a really unique area that is identified as moral courage. And this one was really valuable to me as a coach. So I want to share it with you because it was really interesting to me when it would be make sense for a lot of people. And I think it's okay to kind of say that like moral courage requires an emotional component to it, like an emotional courage as well. But the distinction has been helpful because moral courage is like standing up for what you believe is right. And standing up for what you believe is right is different than your values, right? Because I can be courageous in living my own values, right? So I value authenticity and I value freedom and I value, my family and I live those, but I don't cast judgment on anybody who chooses to live otherwise. Moral courage is when I think I've talked to you guys about my friend at the dog park, this oldish man who's everything that is just offensive to like middle-aged feminist, and I think I've told you guys, because my personal stance on vaccines was that I felt like it wasn't the right choice, that I didn't agree with the lockdowns. I didn't agree that mass vaccination and the mandates and everything, but my reasons for believing that were very, very specific to my beliefs around health and, disempowerment and like all that kind of stuff. This guy decided that I was like right up his alley. Like, this is the guy who was like, he's got this like fellow super right wing, like, I must love Trump and I must think that like, women should stay in their place. Like, it is so wild how it just sort of got brought in. And again, we bring our dogs to the same park. That is as far as the connection goes. But I have now chosen this man as my like practice exercise for moral courage. So when he says to me things like, my son has this friend and they're having a baby and they said they're not even going to tell people the gender of the baby because they don't think that matters. What kind of people? And then I really practice this like, okay, moral courage here, rather than what would be so easy to be like, roll my eyes and be like, whatever, this man, he has his eye that doesn't affect my life, but to actually practice like, what? I don't know if it's okay to decide that these people are, and to try and stand up. And it's really, really hard, even though this guy is meaningless to me. And I use it as this practice of like, how do you stand up for these things to somebody? And what does it feel like? Like, what does it actually feel like? And then the decisions between like, was that worth it? Not really. Or like, yeah, that actually felt really, really important and integral, right? That really supported my own sense of like, I'm glad I said that. Like, I'm glad this man heard somebody say, I don't know if it's okay to talk about immigrants that way. Seems real mean, like just to be able to, so it's a really, really interesting thing. And I work with my clients a lot on like, where can you practice moral courage? And you need to find really safe places to do it. Because as we're going to talk about in a minute, it's one thing to change a belief, right? So it's one thing to say, I don't know, whatever the belief would be that comes in front of moral courage. So like, it's okay for me to have a different opinion than my family or something like that, right? And you put everything in place that you feel worthy and you feel strong and you feel aligned and like all these things that are really helpful. And the belief is absolutely crystal clear to you. I have the right to express, my opinion, and I don't have to agree with the rest of my family. But without practice, it's actually there's still a skill there, right? Like it just because you now have the belief and essentially the courage, like emotionally the courage, if this is something that you haven't done your whole life, if for 30 or 40 or 50 years, you're not in a habit of standing up or speaking out or expressing or demonstrating your moral courage somehow, it's not necessarily going to come easy to you. And do you guys remember the Myers-Briggs stuff where we talk about the extroverts and the introverts? So when I'm working with my extroverted clients, remember, for those of you that have done this, the extroverts, for them, the type of thing, until they have the experience, it's not really real to them. So it actually works quite well for an extrovert to say, okay, you know what? You've got this. You've got everything you need. You're going to go have dinner with your family tomorrow night. And you've made the decision that you're going to finally speak your truth, right? You're going to let them know that you don't appreciate this comment or whatever the case may be. For an extroverted person, it may be, in fact, that they can go say it, experience it, and then with practice, that experience is actually going to give them then the ability to do it in a more consistent way. Now that courage is going to turn into like what some people will call bravery, which is like always standing up for their truth and that sort of thing. For an introvert, on the other hand, if you remember the introvert, it's the inner experience. Until they have understanding, the experience is not real to them. They don't have the full real experience until they have understanding. And the inner world is what's real for them. So for an introvert, it can be, I don't know if those introverts out there can identify with this, but sometimes I'll get, like, if I'm with some extroverted people, and I won't name my husband here, but if I'm with some extroverted people who do that, like, just go do it, Tara. Stop talking about it. Stop trying to like analyze it. Just go do it, right? Because the extrovert is going, just do it so you can have the experience. And for me, sometimes I'll go have the experience, whatever it is. And then I'll come back. But being the introvert that I am, I'll actually then I'll learn about it. Then I'll like go into a deeper understanding myself, and I'll come back with like, if you had just let me understand this first, like if I had just been able to get my head around this, then when I had the experience, I could have experienced it more fully. Like it could have been more real for me if I had just first had this understanding of it. And that difference is really important when it comes to courage, because it would be easy to watch somebody like me do something and I don't do it very well, and it scares the shit out of me to do it, and I come back not having had a great experience of it. It would be easy to say that I don't have that courage, but it's just because of the sequence, the order of things, right? For me, I need to have that practice, and then I need to have that time to, it's actually going to be much more important for me to have the inner experience of it all, and then go practice it again and then have that, right? Whereas again, for the extroverts, it may be like, go do it, then come back for reflection, then go do it, then come back for reflection. And again, we need to make sure that with our clients, when we're helping them have something like moral courage, that we make sure to build in the practice. Otherwise, it's possible. Cool. It's possible that you're going to set them up to, it's going to have a counter effect, because they're going to feel like they were all ready for it. Like they're going to feel like they had all the everything ducks in a line. They've got everything sorted out. All their limiting beliefs are taken care of. All the parts are taken care of. And then they go have the experience and they don't feel courageous, right? They feel like it didn't go well, and they give up on themselves, right? So you really want to build in this practicing having courage, especially when it comes to moral courage. It's true also though of emotional courage, right? And probably physical. I don't even, I'm not going to speak a lot about physical courage, but I'm sure it's true there too. Cool. Okay. If anyone has any comments or questions or anything, feel free. Okay. So here's what I would like you to do. So if everyone could, I would encourage you to have a piece of paper or like a whatever document or whatever suits you best. But what I would like you to do is you're going to divide. So I'm going to give you a second to think about this. You're going to need 9 columns. Okay. So you might want to do like on one page 3, on the next page 3, on the next page 3, but you're going to need 9 columns. Each of them is going to require a list. You're not writing sentences or anything. You're just writing words, but you're going to have some words under each of the columns. So however you want to set that up. Okay. So under the very first column, I want you just to write the word courage. And what you're going to do in this first column is you're going to write down some of the things that require courage and you do them. Okay? So things that require you to call courage, conscious awareness of the courage, and you do them. And so I'm going to give some suggestion. Don't, just write your own things, but just to get you ideas of it, it's things like speaking, meeting challenges. Guys, if you want to get real specific, like really specific, like, telling my son that he has to, whatever. Or you can stay more vague, like, speaking up in a meeting or sharing my opinion with my peers or something like that. Saying sorry. And if it is specific to you, so if you happen to, like, maybe you say sorry all the time to your sister, like you can say sorry to your sister any day of the week, not a problem, but saying sorry to somebody else in your life feels particularly hard. Make sure you actually identify that, okay? Being wrong, admitting that you're wrong, like having to out loud say that you're wrong, trusting, forgiving, standing up for a value, having a different opinion than other people, actually writing down your goals, telling people your goals, listening to others, like staying present with somebody else and listening to them can often require courage. So this doesn't have to be exhaustive, but I do want it to be representative. So I want you to get at least 5, 6 or more things down, because we're going to look a little bit for patterns. These can be historical too. You can go back and remember, like, that the first time I ran a race, the first time I signed up for a 5K race, or the first video I posted on wherever you post videos. Okay, so you can keep writing, but I'd like you to leave 2 columns blank now beside that one, and then go to the 4th column. And that column, I want you to write down, I don't even know what to label it, maybe brave, but just not even brave, just like things that you do that don't require courage, but they could be seen as courageous. So I'm going to leave this up to you. This is specific to when I'm working with a client. I'm really looking for, like, for me to be polite, even when I'm pissed off, doesn't require any courage at all. Like, because I wouldn't do anything else, right? Like, it's just my default. It's what I do. So it doesn't matter how, like, enraged I feel, unless you're, someone super close to me. I'm still going to be kind. I'm still going to offer politeness and kindness, but I don't need courage to do that, because for me, it's a default. Whereas I know for sure lots of people that I coach and I know in life, for them to stay polite, to stay, kind when they're really angry, actually requires courage. Like, it requires for them to trust that this is the right thing to do, and that they're like, that would require courage. Being honest. For some people, it requires a lot of courage to just be honest, right? It requires courage for some people to be vulnerable in certain ways, and other people is just their default. So, like, on my list of things that I do but don't require courage, I just do them, would be like smiling, being nice, dressing the way I want to dress. Like, I could give a shit. I dress however I feel like dressing. I don't really care about other people's judgment. For other people, that could take a lot of courage, right? Driving, we already talked about it, right? Doesn't require. I know that there are some people that require courage to drive, going in a lion's pen. big dogs, taking on challenging clients, speaking to audiences, doing a talk on courage, making terrible jokes, not worrying about whether people laugh. Yeah, me and Catherine, that's all we do. Okay. So just kind of intuitive, just trust what comes out under this column. And then I want you to skip over, and I want you to go, of course, to the 5th, 6th, 7 column. So these are in little groups of 3. Your 7th column. And I'd like you to write down the things that you feel weak, the things that you feel are fearful for you, the things that you don't have enough courage to do, but would like to. Okay. So in this column, you're writing down, maybe like leave my job, speak up to my mother, tell my sister the truth, kill a spider, post a video, disagree with my friends over dinner, share my views on something. Okay, so these are the things that you feel you don't have enough courage to do. Take some time. I'll give you another minute. I'll stop talking. Okay. So does everybody have at least some under each heading here? Okay, I'll give you another few minutes. Okay.
And these last ones be things that, I mean, it's a little theoretical, right? Because we're not actually doing the thing. For example, I don't right now have a client that I should get rid of, but sometimes you have a difficult client that maybe you need to get rid of, but I don't know that I would do that. But I'm not.
Absolutely.
I'm not
Yep.
in that situation.
Yep. I just asked you to get specific about, that's perfect. I share this with you. Because what is it? What is it specifically, right? Like, is it lacking the courage to say to the person, we're done? Is it lacking the courage to tell them they're not the right client for you? Like, just think for a minute about what specific aspect of that that you're lacking, feel like you may theoretically lack courage to do. Oh, there's Larissa. Okay, I'll let you guys finish as I really quickly explain to Larissa. Hi, Larissa. Okay, Larissa, I'm having them do an actual exercise. They're writing down 3 things you're courageous and you do, and they're writing down things that they do but don't actually require a calling of courage. They just kind of have a natural bravery around it, or a learned bravery around it. And then things that you are too fearful to do, things that you don't do especially well. So I've just asked them to write 3 columns. Okay. So guys, I'd like you to go back to that first one. So go back to the column where these are the things that you have to call your courage up to do them. I would like for you to notice what the benefit is. Sorry, got confused for a second. Call up what is the benefit. So I do this because, and just in a couple of words, because I want, right? So I am honest because, or I am honest with my whoever because here's the benefit I get from it. It makes me feel like a good person. The the benefit I get.
Are these the things that require courage because they're hard to do, so you want the benefit of it? Or is it the stuff that you do easily, like pseudo bravery? I'm confused. Sorry.
Yeah, so am I, because I confused myself. Sorry, guys. I just confused myself. I color coded this and I just read my own color coding now. Okay. Here's what I would like you to do. I apologize for anyone who already wrote this down. Yeah, thank you. The second column. So this is the second column right beside the things that you do with courage, that require courage. I'd like you to actually write down the away from, the potential negative outcome. Okay. So the courage is called up, and listen for a second before you write, because it's specific to the potential negative outcome of this thing that requires my courage. It could be, say I have the courage to, I don't know, there could be physical pain, right? So I have the courage to push myself to do this thing. The potential negative outcome is physical pain, but my courage overcomes that. In some, it could be like, I know that when I have the courage to be honest, it's possible that I'm going to be embarrassed, but I'm willing to overcome that. Okay. What is the thing you're overcoming by choosing courage? I know that I may face humiliation if I dance, but I do it anyway. I know that I may get embarrassed, but I overcome that. I know I may feel shame if I am accountable to what I did, but I'm courageous enough to overcome that. So this is what the courage allows you to overcome, the potential negative outcome. Okay, then I want you to do the column right next to it. So the third column, and just write down what you get from overcoming it. Okay, so these are things like, when I overcome this obstacle and I call to courage, what I get is growth. What I get is a truer connection. What I get is a feeling of authenticity. I get relief. I get acceptance. I might get forgiveness. I might get joy. I might get pleasure. So this is the third column. These are the reasons why you overcome and call to courage. Okay, we're going to skip that middle three, the little trio in the middle. We're going to skip over that. And I want you to go to the last one, the ones where you don't have the courage, the ones where you feel a weakness or a fear. And then just do the same thing. I just want you to write in the next column beside it. So the 8th column, you're going to write down the potential negative outcome. What is it that you're afraid of? What is the negative outcome that stops you from being able to call to courage? So this could be things like, I might lose belonging. I might lose connection. I might lose love. I might lose safety or security. I might feel disgust.
The themes are pretty fascinating.
Right?
Others are noticing it, but I'm like, oh, it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
One of them we talked about yesterday, you and I actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then the one that was 8. So it was 8 was the negative outcomes of the thing that you can't call to courage, that you sort of give in to the fear or the weakness of. Okay. And then the last column, the 9th column, of course, is going to be the possible positive outcome. So what would you get? So these things that you would like to have the courage to do. In this last column, the 9th column, you're going to write down what are the things that you're sort of denying yourself that you could have if you could do these things. So we're going to be looking at things like a possibility, right? That the possibility of a better life, the possibility of more happiness, integrity, maybe pride, obviously being able to like own vulnerability, or however you say that. So before we go to the middle columns, before we go to this middle place, I'd like you to just notice what you notice. Catherine's already pointed out that there is some pretty thematic things that show up. That's likely to be the case for everyone. It's likely to be that there's a similarity thematically in the things that stop you from having the courage, which will likely, oh, interesting. Where did simplicity show up?
So doing the things that I'm too weak to do, if I do them, I gain simplicity in my life.
Oh, but not worth it.
Well, now I'm just, it's like, yeah, it kind of is.
Well, yeah, that's the exercise, right? That's where we're going, of course, right? Essentially, what you're recognizing is that whole last column, that 9th column, you have to acknowledge that whether consciously or unconsciously, there is a very clear belief that this value, whatever it is not worth it, right? There is a lack of, it's not for not wanting it. You'll look at them and you'll realize that, no, you want all these things, but there must be a devaluing. So it really interrupts and disrupts when somebody says to me, I really want to lose weight, or I really want to quit my job, or I really want to pursue this dream or whatever, but I don't have the courage to whatever the thing is in the way. When we can break it up this way, and the person has to acknowledge that this outcome is actually not worth it to me. It's not enough to motivate the courage. What you're also going to notice, what is so important about this, is they're going to notice that in that other category of things they do overcome, they have the resources they need. They have the ability to actually overcome other things that give them the same type of reward. But in this case, we need to look at what the unique belief is around why they don't have the courage for it. So I know that was convoluted, but just so to look at those themes, does anybody else have anything that kind of stood out to them that they're, you don't have to share, obviously. But if there's anything that you think is interesting to you or to us in terms of themes. Michelle, have you got one there?
I was going to type it, but judgment. So
where?
A couple places. So, and some of the things that I have courage to do, of being able to face that and say, okay, this could be there, but I'm willing to do that anyways. One of them was holding boundaries with family. So leaning into that.
So the holding boundaries with family is in the thing you don't have the courage to do?
That I do have the courage to do.
Oh, you do have the courage to do. Okay.
But then also noticing judgment coming up on the weaknesses for things that I don't have the courage to do. So I was seeing it in both, but some it's just a little stronger than others.
And this is what you want. This is what you want to have your client show you, is that there's actually the same thing, that the same obstacle is in the way of two different things, but one you have the courage to overcome and one you don't have the courage to overcome. And there's got to be a reason, right? This is not just we are not random. Human beings are anything but random, right? So once you can do that, once you can recognize that, like, here you're able to overcome the judgment, because what is the reward, right? What is the reward that you have? I would go further, and I'm not going to do it with you guys because it takes too long, but I would go forward to then actually look at what are the resources that you have that allow you to be courageous here, and what are the resources that you feel you don't, and they're actually going to be just a mirror, right? What is it you feel you don't have that causes you not to be able to find the courage? But once you start working with these, so once you start actually noticing that your mind, it forces your mind to see it differently, to recognize when you start separating the reward from the thing you're overcoming, that you can't just sort of blank statement say, I don't have the courage to do this, because you're going to, if you keep going with this, have evidence down here that you actually do have the courage to do this, but for some reason, you're not able to transpose it into this specific situation, and it's going to pop out. It's going to pop out because of the relationship between the fear of, say, disgust is actually stronger than the desire for, say, like integrity in the self, or pride in the self, or something. So pride is something that you actually have enough courage to go after because you've demonstrated it somewhere else, or whatever the case may be. But when disgust gets in the way, now you can't overcome it. Or the other way around. Somebody would say, well, if I fear that it's going to be disgusting, I won't do it. Well, you're likely able to find a place where if it's this kind of disgust, I'm willing to do it because the reward is this. Right? And it's almost like puzzle pieces. You can start to put this together. And I've had more success in people, how we do so many tools and techniques. We're always doing, clearing, and we're doing all of this tool-based change. When you just start to mix and match, it's a little like a linguistic parts integration where you're separating intention from behavior, and then you start to mix and match them and realize that none of them actually have anything to grip onto. None of them are actually contradicting the other and exclusive like your mind believed that they were. When you start moving these puzzle pieces across and saying, well, would you be courageous enough to overcome that disgust if the reward was this? And if their mind can imagine it, then all of a sudden you can start working with it. You can legitimately just set up the belief. Or they recognize that, like, I legitimately don't want to feel that type of disgust, no matter the reward. And so I can take it right off my list of things that I wish that I had more courage to do, because I want to honor that part of me that doesn't want the disgust, or that doesn't want to risk not belonging. Right? So what we have a habit of doing is we tend to start believing that we don't have courage. We identify as not being courageous because we're not willing to speak up at our family gathering or whatever it is and stand up for this belief because we're afraid of offending or whatever the outcome is, right? But if we can recognize that as like, no, you're actually not, you don't lack the courage when this is the thing that that you require. You have made a decision, you've made a choice that the belonging that you get in this context, in this environment, is not worth losing. It's not worth risking, it's not worth losing. And take this off your list of, remember, we always affirm the beliefs that we believe to be true. Take it off your list of something that affirms a lack of courage in you. And I can actually get my clients down to a place where they start looking down once they've taken everything off and recognize that they actually have like the balance of, are you courageous in your life, is so much more on the side of you actually have the courage to do a lot, a lot of things. And most of the things you thought you lacked courage about are actually because of value that you are honoring, that you mistook as being a lack of courage. And that'll resonate with a lot of us. We kind of know that to a degree, right? But when we don't know how to articulate it, and when we don't know how to articulate that in a language that allows us to know why we still can call ourselves fully courageous, then it gets muddled up and we end up with this sort of identity or this feeling of, I'm not a courageous person. And when you're able to move with a client from their, like we started at the beginning, identifying as someone who feels that they're not courageous enough, like as a human being in the world, to recognizing, no, I've got all this courage and I can actually activate it. Like I understand it now in a way where it feels usable, like where it feels like something that they can actually put into practice. Now we can shift a whole bunch. So follow me here, guys, a whole bunch of those things that they chose not to overcome with courage. If you open up a moral courage, a whole bunch of those can slide into that. A whole bunch of those can actually fit nicely into what I think is moral, or is moral, is to choose kindness, is to offer someone kindness. And so I'm actually not lacking in courage. I'm actually very actively choosing choosing kindness. And that's moral courage. So I want you to go to that middle column. Okay, so go into that middle column. These are the things that you just do and you're kind of brave to do them, but this is, you don't need to call up courage, but you can humbly recognize that like somebody else might think it's courageous, but it comes to you. And I want you to write in the column right beside that, write the things that are there that are not in the other things. So what I mean is I wrote down like smiling, being nice, dressing the way that I want to dress, being honest, loving my animals. That's a longer story. Driving. And the things that I wrote in the column beside it, the things that these share in common that I feel like are missing otherwise, is that I'm very practiced in these things. I'm very practiced in every one of these. I'm practiced in smiling at people. I don't need to call up any courage to do it, even when I'm terrified. I don't have to, like, a lot of people will say, like, even if you're terrified speaking to an audience, if you get courageous enough to like force a smile on your face, you're gonna, and that's courageous for it. They need to call courage to do that. I don't have to. I smile all the time when I'm scared. It's like that doesn't require courage for me. I'm well practiced. So practice is a big one. I also will write beside in that column good outcomes. For the most part, these things that I've written down that I do fairly naturally, I've had pretty good outcomes in my life. I also wrote down that there are matched values. You know, I have chosen not to work in a professional setting where people judge me by my clothes. You know, like I actually surround myself by a lot of people who have similar values to my own. And so in doing a lot of these things, smiling, being nice, dressing down, I actually match most of the people around me. I feel like I match all of you in specifically in these areas, right? Like nobody here is a big asshole. Like it's just, nobody is. Well, Catherine, yeah, Miriam smiles. I love it. But it's a sense of matched values. So for me, probably the reason why I don't have to use a lot of courage, it might be a very different story if I lived with people who had a whole different set of values and didn't I didn't feel like I was matching, right? Some of the things I wrote down were for these things that I can do sort of bravely, I don't perceive a threat. There's no threat to doing them for me. Again, different situation, different environment, different conditions for people. The reason they may need courage to drive is because they actually perceive a threat. I don't, right? Some other things I wrote down were like, they bring me pleasure. All these things bring me pleasure. All these things allow me to feel safe, like a felt sense of safe. So I'm not joking. I have an aunt who owns a zoo. I don't mind going in the cage with the jaguar, because I have a felt sense of safety. For me, it actually feels really safe. My aunt is there, she handles the jaguars. And so I actually weirdly feel safe, right? But that is, I may not be safe. Some would argue I'm not safe. My aunt isn't actually a jaguar, so she probably doesn't move as fast as one, you know? But it's the felt experience of safety, right? I also have choice. Every one of these things that I do that I don't really require courage, I recognize that I have choice. I could choose to dress differently. I could choose to not be nice, right? I could choose to not drive or whatever it is. So I'd like you to just take another moment. I'll stop talking. And these are the qualities that are exclusive to this group. And then in that next column, if you're done, so in your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 column, just write down the benefits you get from these things that you do. Because if you're climbing mountains and for you, that's something that you just do. Yeah, exactly. Catherine has a beautiful one, right? So she can find the positive in a situation, doesn't have to call courage to do it. It's just kind of what she does. It's actually what makes her feel really good, like safer, stronger. Yeah, same with Miriam. Yeah. Right. Whereas other people, holy smokes, is it ever take a lot of courage? I mean, I had a man in my office today where he's in the middle of leaving a 35-year marriage or something. And when I said, like, you got to wake up every morning and find the positive in this situation, it to him was like, that was going to require more courage for him to have to recognize that, like, that's going to benefit him more than waking up pissed off, waking up, you know, all these things that he is. Okay, and then, sorry, that 6th column, you're just going to write the benefits you get. So what I get from these things is I get joy and happiness, I get connection, I get ease, I get comfort. So what I would do with my clients is I would spend quite a bit of time here. Like I may spend 15 minutes with them expanding this list so it's huge. Because remember, these are the things that you don't even feel like require courage, but it could be so easily perceived as being brave. And you get all of these benefits from it. If you look at the list of benefits, some of them are going to match. Some of them are going to match the other columns of benefits, but you probably are going to notice here that you have some that don't come in the others. Like I found all of the synonyms, I could look up in the dictionary, all the synonyms for like ease, comfort, like those kinds of words. That's what I get from all these middle ones, right? And so in a sort of longer span of time, to imagine some of these ones that require courage still, it's a really interesting thought experiment to just imagine what would it be like if you started to do some of these without having to call to courage? And is it possible, and is it realistic? And look at some of the things. So one of the things you probably need to do is to practice this, right? So if you want saying sorry to become something that you don't have to like gather all your courage to do every time you do it, then start doing it more often. Do it just, you know, I don't know, just do it as often as you can, right? If dancing or standing up for a value, this is an experiment with the big meanie at the park, right? Just find a place where it's safe for you to practice doing something that, and the reason I'm doing this, it's not because I lack courage. I do more often than not stand up for my values, my moral things, but I have to use my courage. I shake every time, right? Like I have to really gather myself to stand up to bullies. That's a hard thing for me to do. So what I'm trying to do in this is that I want it to become something that I just do. So when I'm getting pushed around, or when there's somebody who has what I feel like is a really offensive, says a really offensive thing or racist thing or, whatever thing, that I don't have to shake and gather all that. I can just turn around, looking at you, Catherine and Miriam, just turn around and say, you know what, that's not appropriate. If you're going to keep acting that way, you might want to, so you know what I heard?
Is this something you want to say to us, or?
I heard the best interview with Maya Angelou, and somebody said to her, I don't know who it was. It might have been, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. But somebody said to her, I was at your house. Maya Angelou had a gathering of people. And this is a pretty special thing, right? To be invited to her house and like her hosting it and everything else. And somebody came in, and this person who was interviewing her witnessed this happening. Somebody in that party said something that was offside. I'm pretty sure it was like a homophobic sort of type of comment. And they said Maya Angelou, who is like world renowned as being like the nicest human being alive, right? Turned around to this person and said, you know what? I really don't appreciate you saying that in my house. Your coat's over there. And ushered them out of her house. And the interviewer said to her, how in the world do you do that? How do you, with a smile on your face, kick somebody out of your house for one comment? And Maya just said, I just made a decision whenever ago. She laughed and said, I didn't do this when I was 25. I didn't know how to. I didn't have the life experience. I didn't have the maturity. I may not have even had the privilege of doing it, right? Like all of those things. But whatever age I'm 70 now, and you come into my house and you say that, no thanks. There's no place for it. And she went on to sort of say, if we were one-on-one and this person expressed something, sure, we get into a discussion about it, but we were having a party. They weren't welcome anymore. Like it was just, it was so beautiful. Like it was so beautiful. And there was, yeah. So I think that quality of being able to take these things that require courage and move them into that center, you've got to pay attention, right? Try to create good outcomes. If the only time you say sorry is when you have to gather up all the courage in the world and you're saying sorry about like the worst thing you ever did, like you're someone that doesn't normally say sorry. So the one time you or the next time you do, it's because you burnt someone's house down. Well, you're probably not going to have a good outcome, right? It's like chances are you're creating a situation where your memory now of saying sorry may not be really positive. So why don't you give yourself the opportunity to say sorry about some things that are more likely to have a positive outcome, right? So when I'm telling my clients, you now have all the beliefs, we've done all the work, we've cleared the emotions, we've, done all that stuff. Now I put on their activity cards, I put Did I do my best to say sorry? I'm not going to send them out and say, okay, now apologize to your sister for sleeping with her husband. Like, that is not where we're starting, right? I'm going to task her for a week or two of like, you know, apologize to your neighbor for parking on their lawn, you know, apologize to your peer that you spoke over or whatever the case may be. Build up some good experiences where you get familiar with that feeling of like, okay, what do you go home with? Like when you do apologize, what do you bring home? What does that do for you? And get familiar with that. And then, you know, and then go into the other stuff. If there are threats attached to things, then you're going to do the work as a coach to recognize those threats. Make sure that the threat isn't hanging. Remember, we've talked about anxiety where like somebody fears like, I don't want to do that because what if I can't pay? I don't want to go on this course, or I don't want to like put money here because what if I can't pay my mortgage or something? And then they just hang in the fear and the anxiety of that, but they haven't gone out to that next step of like, well, what if that does happen? What if you don't have money in your bank for your mortgage payment? What is going to happen? Well, I'm going to have to call my mortgage guy. Okay. And you're going to have a conversation and they're likely to give you a, you know, whatever, you know, so you go to the like end of it, you know, so can you budget a little more next month? Can you might feel humiliated. Can you handle being humiliated to your mortgage guy once? Yes, you can, right? So if you move them out past the perceived threats, often they realize that they hung up their anxiety before they got to the end, the actual outcome, right? So if you can move them to that, you can actually eliminate a lot of the threats. So I'm going to leave it there because we could probably go on forever and ever and ever, but it's 8:45 and I think that gives you enough of a map to kind of work this with. I'll just finish with internal representations, right? The courage work is always you want to encourage the practice of whatever it is that they're working toward courage from by changing all of the internal representations, meaning the stories that they attach. Make sure that they can see themselves, make sure that they actually see themselves. It's probably the most simple solution for children, anyone that works with children. When you say to a child, you know, I understand you're scared to do this and, you know, blah, 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 blah. I want you to close your eyes and just imagine yourself being really, really courageous. And often just walking through the experience, and we shortchange ourselves all the time. If you just walk through and have the imagination, see yourself and imagine yourself doing it courageously, really slowly, right? Step by step by step. Imagine your posture, imagine your expression, imagine what you'd say, imagine the sound of your voice, get into the whole VAK of the whole thing. And then they finish and you go, okay, that was just an experiment. But you have 100% their unconscious mind now can no longer argue that they can't be courageous. They can choose not to be courageous still, but they've literally just witnessed and noticed that they could actually do this courageously, right? So make sure that that's always one of the you know, sort of finishing step that you're doing with them. Okay, that's it. That's all. So ask me questions. If you want to talk at all, contribute, and like add anything around courage, share anything, go ahead. If you want to, we'll just make sure we've cleared any courage stuff. And then if you want to speak to actual, you know, client stuff. So Miriam, Mateo, you've been here before. What we do once we're done this stuff is just open the floor. If any, I'm going to stop the recording.
I have a question about this topic before we move on.
Oh, okay. Should I record it? Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't matter to me.
We'll record it.
Record it or not.
Yeah.
Going back to the last 3 columns and recognizing that there's values that you're not valuing essentially.
Yeah.
Does this come back to that I can't versus I won't?
I'm not willing to. Yeah. Yeah. So what Tanya's referring to is a real fun task for your clients is to replace the word can't with I'm not willing to. So it's real fun. Every single thing in your whole entire life that you say can't about is truer to say I'm not willing to. So if I say to you, you invite me to a meeting and I say, you know what, I can't be there. Well, the truth is I'm not willing to be there, because what that means is like, I have another engagement that I'm not willing to cancel in order to be there. Or I'm not willing to pay $600 to get on a plane and be where you want me to be. Or I'm not, right? That the true statement is not that I can't. The true statement is I'm not willing. Unless in the very, very weird exception of like someone invites me to speak in an hour in Florida and I'm in Canada, right? Well, I can't. But for the most part, if you replace it with I'm not willing to, it clarifies a lot. It's empowering. Is that what you're referring to, Tanya?
Yeah. And when you're talking about practicing, are you talking about practicing the first 3 columns so they move into the second 3 columns no, the last 3 columns?
Oh, sorry. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Well, see, the last 3 columns, you've got to first move to the first one.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And then I probably should have had you guys do it in a different order. I just wanted this one in the middle. And then the first column, you want to move to the second column. Because once you are an old, wise, guru who's just like sitting there being a fully enlightened human, everything would be in that center column, right? You don't require courage for anything anymore because you've evaporated fear and you just are. You just are, right? You only do the things that you choose to do that are in alignment with who you are. So you don't no longer have a column of things I wish I had the courage to do, because the things you choose not to do, you just don't, because you've recognized that the reason you don't do them is because you don't want to, because they're not in alignment with who you are. And the first column, you don't need to call to courage to anything because there is no fear, right? There is no fear involved with these things. So yeah, I mean, over a lifetime, if you're like me, that's my like 95-year-old goal, is to just be the center column. So yeah, the progression is there. But before you move that column, like that's where it's really important. Before you move that third column, you want to make sure it's actually something you want to become courageous about, and therefore want to bring it into the just way of being. Does that answer? All right. Okay. So I'm going to shut off the recording.